So we were doing 2D arrays and we were learning about it. So इसमें सबसे पहले हम यहाँ we looked at how do we initialize a 2D array. So मैंने आप लोगों को बताया था इसमें एक inner array होगी. So this would be like the values in columns. या इसको आप ऐसे imagine करोगे this is just a 1D array. You write 0 0 0. Okay, अब अगर आप इस 1D array को 3 times replicate कर दो तो you are literally going to get a 2D array that has which has 3 rows and 2 columns. So number of columns आपको कैसे मिलेंगे? जितने भी एक 2D array के अंदर number of values हैं, that's basically the number of columns. So if I pick the first row और इसके अंदर मैं देखता हूँ कितनी values हैं 2 है, so that means it has 2 columns. ठीक है, so we only saw this and then we secondly हमने देखा था कि values को print कैसे करना है in a nice tabular manner. So let's in fact go for a generate random values in 2D array. Okay, now we'll go ahead and we'll write a function to save random values in 2D array. Random table, let's call it. Okay, so we have to use a nested loop. मैंने आज जैसे आप लोगों को बताया था. So for let's say row in range rows, we have rows set as 3, and then for column in range columns, we have column set as 2. Okay, now we have to import random as well, and or you can use the other one from random import star, and which means import all the modules. So we are going to go to table index row. First of all, first it will always be row. Okay, the first index is row and the second one is column, or first one is the some specific 1D array, and then उस 1D array में से आपको कौन सा index चाहिए. The both interpretations are the same. Okay, so here we are going to say rand int, and maybe we are going to generate a value between 1 to 100, and then we'll simply print the table like this. Let's see now. Random table. Okay, meanwhile, let's also print this 2D array in a proper tabular form. Print table, or you can say print 2D array in table. So again, for row in range rows, for column in range columns, and then we simply, if we print the value at each row and each column, what will happen? So वो आपकी सब values है ना वो different lines में output कर देगा, which we do not want. So random table को if I call, it generated a table with random values. So we need to change to rows. Okay, so we have 38, 45. If I run it again, every time I'm getting random values. Okay. Now this was straightforward. मैंने सिर्फ एक random int का function use किया that will generate random values between 1 to 100, and I'm putting it in the current row and the current column of my 2D array. Now in some of the past paper questions, they will ask you that you need to print this 2D array in a tabular format. That means कि आपके पास एक लाइन में आपकी एक रो आए और फिर दूसरी लाइन में दूसरी रो, थर्ड लाइन में थर्ड रो. अभी के लिए if you just try to print the 2D array table like this. Okay, so if we print the values one by one, then they are all printed in separate lines. But we want to print each row in one line. So uske liye what we can do is that once you have printed all the columns for row, we can simply add a line break like this. Okay, this separates out the values. So 2 columns हैं आपके पास 3 rows में, so this looks fine, but columns should be in the same line. So हम n का function use करके I can just use /t here, so they are separated by a tab space. So now 26 and 97 are in one line. This is second row, this is third row. If I make it simply, let's call it my table 2, let's say. And if I try to print table 2 but without this part, this will print you a simple 1D array, okay, with 2 zeros. If you replicate this 1D array and you say that this 1D array will now have 2 more 1D arrays like this now becomes a 2D array. How does it become a 2D array? Now it is a collection of 1D arrays. So you can actually index them separately. So this would be 0th 1D array, this would be 1 1D array, and this would be 2 1D array, all these indices. So when I access index 1, I get this 1D array. And then when I check the length of this 1D array, it is 2. So basically you have two values in each 1D arrays. So this becomes two columns. And then the total number of 1D arrays that we have is 3. So this becomes the number of rows. और अगर आपने इसको easily visualize करना है, तो you can actually literally separate them out in Python like this. You can draw them like this as long as you have this square bracket with it. So ये अब आपका एक 2D array इस तरह से visualize हो जाएगी. So row 0, row 1, row 2 और 1D array 0, 1D array 1, 1D array 2. And then if I pick, let's say 1D array 2, index 0, so I get this. And if I pick this index 2 wali jo array iska second element pe jaऊं मैं, so I will get 0 again. So this is how it works. This is column 0, this is column 1, this is row 0, row 1, row 2. अब इसको हमने generate कैसे किया? So I simply said that whatever we got in this 1D array, now we have to replicate this multiple times. So I'll put this whole thing in a square bracket because I want to generate it as multiple 1D arrays, and then I run it for, let's say, r in range maybe 3. And if I run it again and I print table 2's value, now I'm getting this. It has 2 zeros in 3 different rows, or 2 zeros in 3 different 1D arrays. However you want to visualize it, it's up to you. So this is 1D array, this is row 0, this is row 1, this is row 2, or this is array 0, array 1, and array 2. And this is how we print the table in the 2D array in a tabular form. और इसमें हमने values भी randomly generate कर लिया. ठीक है, so these are the basics. Then I have talked about this. Okay, now let's talk about more functions of 2D array. Now let's quickly look at some 2D array algorithms. Okay, first of all we have the sum. So इसको मैं random table को नीचे भी ले जाता हूँ एक दफा, और इसमें हम सारे functions अपने लिख लेंगे. Okay, first of all we'll use the sum all values in 2D array. Okay, for that I define let's say sum table, and then in order to get all the values in 2D array I need to call it. So we have main here, we have random table, and then here we have sum table. Okay, so we got this 2D array. अब हमने इसकी values को sum करना है. Sum करने के लिए we need to use a nested loop to get all the values. So for, let's say, I in range we have 3 rows, and then for j in range 2 we have 2 columns. Or you can use the variables, we have rows and columns. So for for r in range rows and for c in range columns. Okay, I need to get the current value, which would be in table index r index column, and then I simply need to add it to the total. So total plus equal to current. Just now log 1D array में करते हो, nothing different, and total is set to 0, and then we can simply return the value of total, and we can find the average as well. Total divided by, okay, so the total number of values in this 2D array would be rows times columns. So if you have 3 rows and 2 columns, you'll get a total value of 6. So we can return multiple values in Python. So we can return total comma average like that, and we can also print it. For now, total comma average sum and average. Okay, so it's giving me sum as 295 and average as 491. So if you want to reduce the number of decimal places, I told you have to put a colon, then you have to put a dot, and then you can write 2f. This means 2 decimal places. So now it looks much better like this. Okay, so return abhi hum nahi kar rahe, you can do it afterwards. And let's quickly sum all these values to see. We have 53, 65. Okay, let's make the value small for now. 1 to 5 kar lete hain. So we have 5, then we have 9, 13, 23. Okay, average sum is 23. Looks good. ठीक है, ये sum और average इस तरह से आप लोग कर सकते हो. Okay, then the next part is how do we sum a specific row, some nth row of 2D array, and then there would be some nth column of 2D array. And then before we do those, in fact, I forgot one more. So that is how do we iterate or traverse the 2D. Traverse means to go through all the values. Traverse column wise, and then traverse row wise. Okay, अब इसका क्या मतलब है? So there are some parts in the pseudocode questions or Python questions where you have to actually access your 2D array in the columnar format. So rather than reading line by line, आपने पहले column 1 की value पढ़नी. So 72, 41, 26, and then 68, 42, 88, like that. And in some questions, they will ask you कि आपने row by row जाना. So 72, 68, 41, 42, 26, 88, stuff like that. Okay, so how do we make sure that we do it properly? उसके लिए, in order to go row wise, वो आप लोगों को already पता है, we have already done this. So this is the row wise fashion. I can just copy this. Row wise, and I can just print table, row, and column, and I'll print an empty line after each of it. So let's see row wise. Okay, if I print the values row wise, so you can see पहले 1 5 print हो रहा है, ठीक है, then 2 5 print हो रहा है, okay, then 3 4 print हो रहा है. So ये आपका by default row wise चलेगा. But if we want to do it for the column now, so how do we do it? Again, इसको भी हम थोड़ा सा tabular form में ले आते हैं, so it looks nicer. /t, ठीक है, so ये row wise आपका print हो गया.
What does the tab thing do?
It just adds spaces. So you can add manual spaces by pressing spacebar, or you can just use /t, तो ये एक tab space आपकी add कर देगा. Okay, then let's do it column wise. So column wise will be the same thing. Define column wise, but it will be done in the opposite manner. So here we have, first we'll do for columns now, for column in range, and then we'll do for row in range like this, and then we'll print the values. Okay, what does it mean? So अब आपने column choose करके फिर आपने उस row में जाना है. So if the value of column is 0 and then row is set to 0 1 2, so what does that mean? So column is set to 0, we pick column 0, and then we go to row 0, that gets you 1, then row 1 gets you 2, and then row 3 gets you 3. Then column number changes to 1, and then row 0, then row 1, then row 2. So the same thing, just in the opposite direction. बस हमने इसमें क्या किया, हमने अपने जो लूप वेरिएबल्स उनको स्वैप कर दिया. बट व्हेन यू आर एक्सेसिंग द वैल्यूज, तो आपका रो हमेशा पहले ही आएगी, उसको आपने स्विच नहीं करना. सो इफ आई प्रिंट इट नाउ, तो अगर हम कॉलम वाइज को प्रिंट कर लें साथ, तो यू गाइस कैन क्लियरली सी यहाँ पे इट विल बी ऐड एन एम्प्टी स्टेटमेंट. सो इट नाउ प्रिंट्स 1 9 5. ठीक है, ये एक कॉलम आपका प्रिंट हो गया 195 like this, then 287, this is printed like this. So it's done correctly as well. Okay, let just one last thing, sum the nth row of the 2D array. Okay, what if I ask you that you only have to sum this row, the row 1? So इसके लिए आपको क्या करना है? Now you don't have to use a nested loop here because row number is already given to you. You just need to change the column number. So you'll go to row 1 column 0, then row 1 column 1. Similarly, if I ask you that you need to sum column 0, so you don't need to use a nested loop, you will just use column 0, and then you go to row 0, then row 1, then row 2. इस तरह से आप नहीं करने से. Okay, so इसमें हम क्या करेंगे? We'll use define sum row, और इसमें हम कोई nth row भेज देंगे, n row, or we'll just use a single loop now. So for column in range, जितने भी columns थे मेरे पास, and this time, so अब हमने sum को 0 कर दिया. Now we have to move column wise. So अब हमने क्या करना है? हमने अपनी टेबल की करंट nth रो के कॉलम नंबर C के ऊपर जो भी वैल्यू होगी उसको हमने टोटल में ऐड कर देना. सो रो सम प्लस इक्वल टू दिस वैल्यू. ठीक, सो जो कॉलम की वैल्यू वो आपके पास C में आ जाएगी, और nth रो जो है वो जो यूजर पास करेगा. सो लेट्स से यूजर सेंड्स 2, सो दिस एसेंशियली बिकम्स 2 0, देन 2 1, देन 2 2. सो अब आपकी करंट रो के आप मल्टीपल कॉलम्स पे जा रहे हो. सो दिस विल प्रिंट यू द सम ऑफ अ स्पेसिफिक रो, एंड देन यू कैन रिटर्न द रो सम. एंड अगर हमने इसको कॉलम के लिए करना है, सो सेम लॉजिक, but with a bit of difference. So we'll say column sum is equal to 0 for row in range, जितनी भी आपके पास rows है, और इसमें अब आपने कॉलम सम के लिए अब आपने कॉलम सेम रहेगा आपका और आपकी जो रो है वो चेंज होती रहेगी. सो टेबल के जो भी करंट रो है उसके आपने एन कॉलम को आपने ऐड कर देना है. सो यहाँ पे डिफाइन नहीं किया मैंने, डिफाइन कॉलम सम, और यहाँ पे हम कह देते हैं एन कॉलम. सो ये जो कॉलम नंबर यूजर पास करेगा वो यहाँ पे आ जाएगा. सो रो लेट से आपके पास जो है वो आपने कॉलम 1 का फाइंड करना सम, तो पहले आपकी रो 0 हो जाएगी, then this becomes 1 and this becomes 2, so it will essentially add up the whole column 1 जो भी आपने यहाँ पे स्पेसिफाई किया वो ऑटोमेटिकली हर रो पे जाता जाएगा उसके, and then you can return the value of column sum. That's it.